All right, welcome everyone to the May 20th, 2014 Shakopee City Council meeting. Ms. Weckman, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Lehman?
Here.
Councilmember Mokel?
Here.
Councilmember Luce?
Here.
Councilmember Whiting?
Here.
Mayor Tabke?
Here. All stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Nothing from staff, Mr.
Anything
Mayor.
from council? All right, seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Councilor Whiting, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Anything to remove or add to consent this evening?
Mayor Tabke, could we add F1, F2, and F3 to consent?
F1, F2, and F3. So 10 F1, F2, and F3?
Yes.
The Parks and Natural Resources?
Yes.
Does anyone have a problem with that?
No, I guess I wanted to discuss the tree one just a little bit more.
Okay. What about F2 and F3?
Well, I think the landscape's going to be contingent on
Yeah,
the tree
on
one.
moving those.
Hopefully they'll be brief.
Hopefully they'll be brief because we know we've talked about them enough.
I know.
I think that's
what
for
I was
sure.
thinking.
I was also curious about the other ones actually. Councilor Lehman?
10E1
Yes.
should be on consent.
How about E2?
Yeah, you can do that one too.
Yeah.
Then I'd like to remove 4A1.
4A1, remove. Okay, so just to make sure everybody's up to date here, 4A1, remove. 10E1 and 10E2, add to consent. Would anyone have a problem putting 10D1 on consent?
I'm fine with that.
No? Good.
Okay. And we'll also add 10D1 to consent as well. So we have, we have removed 10A1. I would also like to remove 10F3.
10A1, it was
Oh, sorry, 4F3. I'm sorry.
4A1.
Good luck
I
on
said-
10A1.
All right, I will start over. I got my 4s mixed up. So we are removing 4A1 and then 4F3 I would like to remove.
Okay.
And then we are adding 10D1, 10E1, and 10E2. Everyone clear?
And you'll keep us on track.
I will totally keep us on track. All right, that good?
Sure.
Clear? All right, Councilor Lehman,
Motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
do we have a second?
Mayor,
Somebody, Councilor Mokum.
please, point of information, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Are we, is 10F1 and and F2, are those on consent or off consent?
10F1 and 10F2 are not on consent.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We have a motion and it is seconded. Mr. McNeil, could you please read the consent business?
Yes. 4A1 was removed. 4A2 adopts resolution number 7452, setting a public hearing for June 17th to consider the vacation of right-of-way and drainage and utility easements on Fairhaven Drive. 4B1 declares 3 forfeited vehicles held by the police department to be surplus property and authorizes proper sale or disposal of these vehicles. 4C1 adopts resolution number 7450, accepting bids and awarding a contract for lift station L16 and force main improvements, project number 2014-5, including a contingency amount of 5% to cover change orders and quantity adjustments. 4C2 approves the purchase of 1 new motor grader at the amount of $134,110, including a trade-in of a 1993 model from Ziegler Incorporated. 4C3 approves the purchase of 2 pickup trucks from Midway Ford in the amount of $51,172 and 2 new plows and accessories from Aspen Equipment in the amount of $16,010, and further declares 2 pickup trucks held by the Public Works Department to be surplus property and authorizes proper sale or disposal of those trucks. 4C4 approves an amendment to an extension agreement for additional design fees for the East Shakopee Industrial Sewer Improvements Project number 2013-4. 4D1, adopts ordinance number 887, amending Shakopee City Code regarding routine personnel hiring, promotion, and civil service duties to be performed by the Office of the City Administrator. 4E1, declares two portable storage, sections located in the Enigma Teen Center to be surplus property and authorizes proper sale or disposal of these items. 4F1, approves the minutes of the April 15th and April 29th City Council meetings, and note the revision on the 429 minutes on the table. 4F2, approves payments of bills and electronic transfers in the amount of $1,159,211.33. 4F3 was removed from consent agenda. 4D1 was added to consent agenda, and that involves consideration of a Scott County Community Development Agency CDA Economic Development Incentive Grant Application Resolution 7451. And two others were added to consent. One would be authorization to promote a project coordinator as described in your memo on your table. And 10E2, authorizes a trade time for fitness employee benefit program.
Thank you very much, sir. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. Anyone who's here to discuss? Mr. Olson.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Jordan Olson.
Hold on just a second.
Mike,
Can you guys hear
Oh.
us? Because I can't.
Tess?
Oh. You must have. Yeah, there we go. We're better now.
We're better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Mayor and members of council, my name is Jordan Olson. I live at 249 Mount Street. I just have kind of a question for the city tonight. I was up at by the Cub Foods area today, having a lunch with my friend at a new restaurant, Tradiciones. It's good or whatever, but I was only there for about not even 20 minutes. I walk in, I get a sandwich, and within the course of about 11 minutes, I saw the same two police officers pull about literally five different cars over within about not even 12 minutes. I'm wondering if there was some sort of speed trap or there was some program going on at that intersection, or why they would need to pull over so many people in such a short amount of time in front of a new business. I thought certainly that can be good for business. If I was the owner, I might be, I'd be very concerned about that. So I would just like to know if there was some sort of speed trap there today,
Got it.
or
Thank you. I don't think-
anything.
Yeah, anybody from here is going to be able to answer that for you.
Where can I go for that information, Mayor?
The chief would be the one to talk to about that.
We
Mr.
will
McNeil.
have the chief get a hold of you if you'd like to do that. Have us do that.
Yeah, I would actually, I would really appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have an item to discuss? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to item 6A, public hearings for the issuance of Series 1014 bonds, resolution number 7449. Ms. Linehan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and the viewing public. Before you tonight, we will have a request in the public hearing for the approval of Resolution 7449. This is a resolution, and this is a consideration and approval authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of healthcare facilities revenue refunding bonds, St. Francis Regional Medical Center, SFRMC, Series 2014. This is for the benefit of St. Francis Regional Medical Center and execution and delivery of related documents.
I'm sorry, I forgot to open public
the
hearing, so if we
public
could do
hearing.
that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to open a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
A second.
Somebody, Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I could repeat all that, but I'm pretty
No, I think
sure
we're
it's
okay.
pretty clear.
Yeah.
With you this evening is Julie Eddington with Kennedy and Graven, who has worked closely with this issuance. We also have members from the St. Francis Regional Medical Center here if there are any questions. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Eddington for a presentation for your information before you pass this important resolution.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Julie Eddington with Kennedy and Graven, and we represent the city as their public finance council. St. Francis has asked that the city issue bonds for them in the maximum amount of $55 million. The bond proceeds are going to be used for refunding a 2004 bond issue that the city issued on behalf of St. Francis to do various capital improvements to their facility. There won't be any new capital expenditures at this time. It will just be a pure refunding. It's being done for debt service savings and some other reasons. They're getting rid of a debt service reserve fund and some other covenants. Today is a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, we're asking that you approve the resolution that's in front of you that approves the issuance of these refunding bonds, and it also approves the execution and delivery of various documents between the city and the borrower or the hospital. It's important to note that when the city issues conduit bonds like this, they are not liable for any of the debt service. It does not affect the city's bond rating or any sort of credit rating the city might have. Issuing these bonds does affect your ability to issue bank qualified bonds this year. As you recall, we've talked about this in the past. The city has the ability to issue bank qualified bonds in the amount of $10 million every year for its own purposes, like street reconstruction or some type of improvement bonds, those kinds of things. The city will not be able to issue bank qualified bonds this year. Other than that, the documents do fully indemnify the city from any debt service payments or any liability related to the bonds.
Questions from council? None? Councilor Lehman.
A couple of them. It talks about the city's interest in the agreement, in the loan agreement, and then it talks about a bond indenture or a loan agreement. At what point do we get to see that document?
Those are on file with the city today, and I'm happy to send copies of those to you if you'd like.
Okay.
The bond indenture is a document between the city and the trustee that will hold the money for the bonds and collect debt service from the hospital and pay the bonds. It is a document that's geared toward protecting the bondholders. The loan agreement is between the hospital and the city, and under the loan agreement, the hospital promises to pay all debt service on the bonds and any other payments that would be necessary related to the bonds. For instance, paying the trustee's fee, paying the city's expenses, those kinds of things.
If they couldn't pay it, then who pays it?
If the hospital cannot pay the debt service, then they've got owners who may step up to do that as well. If there's a catastrophic event and no one can pay the debt service, the bondholders go without payment, and people will not come to the city looking for payments.
Okay. And then the last question I had, Mayor, was page 3. It talks about as long as changes aren't materially changing the substance of the agreement or the indenture, unless the mayor and the city administrator in their discretion determine otherwise, they can make them changes?
The documents are in a pretty good form at this point. They're almost final. That language allows the city administrator and the mayor to sign the documents after today, even if there are some changes. There won't be any material changes, but we may add a covenant for the borrower or take away a covenant to the borrower based on how these bonds are being sold to the public. So when they are sold to the public might come and say, well, we want this extra covenant, so we would change the documents to reflect that.
Okay, is it normal that we don't see these agreements ahead of time?
The city staff does have copies of them, and we're happy to give them to you if you'd like. They're about this thick,
Okay.
and we don't usually put them in the packets because they're a lot of reading, and they are a lot of legalese. But we are happy to give you access to those if you like.
How about just a short page or two overview of what's in the agreement that
I would be happy to do that. We've done a summary of the documents for the offering document, and I can certainly send that on to Mr. McNeil and Ms. Linehan, and they can forward it on to you.
Okay.
Councilor Whiting.
All council. Sorry.
I think that's a question for Ms. Linehan. You had mentioned we can't issue bank qualified bonds. We have no plan on issuing any bank qualified bonds, but what about refunding some of our own bonds? I know we've gone through that.
Correct.
Would that prohibit us from doing that also if that became attractive?
I'll take the first issue first. Are we going to do a refunding? No, in fact, on a quarterly basis, we meet with Springstead and discuss the issue of bond refunding. And at this point, either the call dates aren't optional to us to do the refunding, or there just simply is no financial capability. So for the remainder of 2014 and going into 15, we have no ability at this point or need to refund debt.
Okay.
We did the last debt refunding in late 2012, and that was yeah, it's been about a year and a half now, and that was the last time it proved financially positive to do so. Okay.
Thank you.
More question, Mayor.
Councilor Lehman.
Our bonding for road projects and stuff like that, this doesn't have any effect on that whatsoever.
It would if you planned on bonding this year. You wouldn't be able to issue those on a bank qualified basis. But as Ms. Linehan mentioned, the city doesn't plan on issuing any bonds this year.
Okay.
If, for example, there was an emergency and you had to do a bond issue at the end of the year, there is some language in the loan agreement that would require the hospital to reimburse you for the spread between bank qualified bonds and non-bank qualified bonds. But in speaking to staff, it's their presumption that there won't be any bonds issued by the city this year.
Okay, so next year, if we do road projects and we bond $2 million for that,
On January 1, 2015, you get another $10 million worth of bank qualified bonds to issue throughout the year.
And does this preclude us from doing any other conduit bonds? Or
No, you can do as many conduit bonds as you'd like this year.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Lehman, if I can follow up on that. We, at the April City Council meeting, did a recent transfer that moved funds from the general fund to the capital improvement fund. Those funds are in place to fund this year's roads projects.
All right. Any other questions from council? All right, this is a public hearing, so if anyone would like to speak on this item as a public hearing. All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Councilor Mokel, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, any further questions on this resolution number 7449? Entertain a motion. Councilor Whiting.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 7449, a resolution authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of its healthcare facilities revenue refunding bonds to St. Francis Regional Medical Center, Series 2014, for the benefit of St. Francis Regional Medical Center and the execution and delivery of related documents.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Luce. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Item number 7, business review from consent agenda. We'll start with 4A1. Councilor Lehman.
The change to the signage and flag ordinance, I guess my question is, well, first we should probably state in there that if they have to fly the corporate flag with a national or political subdivision, county, states, city, whatever, but it doesn't say which one. Do they have to follow the flag etiquette that the national flag is on top or the city flag is on top of the corporate flag?
Councilor Lehman, members of the council, they would be required to follow national flag etiquette.
Okay.
We don't incorporate that in our ordinance specifically, though.
Okay, and then is it time pressing enough to where we couldn't include that change in with the sign update that we've been kicking around for quite a while?
Well, Counselor, the issue arose because one of our newer business residents in the city of Shakopee presented a sign plan that had a corporate flag. And unfortunately, in the current ordinance, it is clearly by definition of a sign, and it would have counted against their wall signage. It seemed to us at a staff level that having an identifying flag as part of an entry feature, as they were proposing, is reasonable so long as it is fairly limited. We had the question at the Planning Commission, what happens if they want to put one every 20 feet on their property? And clearly this would not allow that. So it is probably more pressing than I think the review at the Chamber of the Sign Ordinance appears to be at this point.
So let me ask council, how pressing is the update to the sign ordinance?
It's
What is
quite
the
pressing.
timeline on the sign ordinance then?
Well, members of the council, the Chamber's Public Policy Committee brought forward to the Economic Development Advisory Committee in October of 2012 a set of recommendations. And I and other staff worked with them in the Planning Commission, which met, I think, at least 3 times together to go through drafts to put that together. It has now probably been about 7 months since it was submitted to the Chamber of Commerce for their review to determine whether or not they felt it was ready to move forward to the City Council.
Mr. McNeil?
It's my understanding that the Public Policy Committee was going to devote their entire meeting this month to the review of that, so we expect that to be coming back to us soon.
Okay.
Perfect.
I just thought we'd kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
I know.
Apparently not.
Yeah, this needs to go, would be a good idea for this to go through before we get the sign ordinance finished. And this will be incorporated into the sign ordinance, I would assume.
Well, this would, yeah, this would already be in there.
Yeah.
All right, well then I will make a motion to pass ordinance 888, amending the City of Shakopee sign ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 4F3, amending city social media policy. I pulled this off because I have one concern with it. It is the social media policy as it's in here. When it was adopted back in, I don't know, 2010, something like that, Chris? When was it?
Yes, originally in 2010.
I wasn't a fan of this policy at that time, and I'm still not a fan of it, just the way it's written. It's, in my opinion, written very much in a defensive mode for 100% protecting the city as opposed to allowing and promoting the effective use of social media and community building, but that's my thing, obviously. And so, I wanted 2 things. One, in the personal policy section of it. I had it up here, sorry. E3 on there. Where it talks about I would actually add something to this, and I think it was Jim who, when I started as mayor, helped me get wording for identifying the account as not representing the official opinions of the city or of the employer, that tweets don't or posts don't represent the employer or the official position, something like that. I would like to see that added in there so that if someone has a personal account that could be used to communicate with people for city business. So if someone, if I were an official employee of the city and somebody asked me where to find information on some sort of code, ordinance, something like that, I could respond to it not as a city employee, but as someone who has the information, and it would be clear on there that I'm responding from my personal account, if that makes sense. you know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying, but I think the end consequence of that is that all 300 plus city employees need to have a disclaimer on their private social media page, and I'm not sure that that's going to go over very well, or that it's all that. I don't think that necessarily the public looks to each and every individual city employee for answers to their questions. You know, occasionally,
Right.
certainly, if, you know, your neighbor knows you worked for the city, I happen to be a resident of the city, I'll get, you know, inquiries from my neighbors about things either, you know, over the backyard fence or via text or whatever, but
Right.
Jim, do you have any thoughts on how we address the mayor's issue?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the policy does say that staff should not use their personal social media to speak on behalf of the city. Are you suggesting going further than that and actually say requiring a disclaimer, that they put a disclaimer on their personal website that they are not speaking on behalf of the city? Is that the suggestion?
Well, my concern comes from in that 3A where
Yes.
in utilizing any sort of communication, you're not going to be able to put a firewall in between talking about city things and talking about personal things. And so I think that A is really difficult to, that should not use their personal social media accounts to speak on behalf of the city. I think that's really difficult in practice and in policy to, especially within social media, to actually do that. So I would pull that one out and just say that if it's someone who's communicating with the public about city issues, that it's not the official position of the city. Do you, Councilor Lehman?
2 points. The first would be, does the department heads have the ability to do remote access if they have to be answering a question on behalf of the city?
Yes, most of our department heads, if not all, are equipped with city-issued smartphones. This is on employees' personal social media pages, though. This isn't about, you know, say the fire department has a Facebook page. And if somebody posts a question to it, the fire chief has the ability to get on remotely, whether he's in the office or out of the office, and answer that question. So does the fire marshal, and I believe several other officials of the fire department.
What I'm trying to point out, Chris, is that there's really no need for somebody that works for the city to have to use their personal account to log in to respond when they've got the ability to remote access.
I would agree with that.
So, did you write this?
The policy is modeled after the city of Woodbury's, and I was involved in it, as was our previous communications coordinator when it was previously adopted. Our current communications coordinator drafted the amendments and ran them by me.
I think you did a fine job. The only part I kind of tweaked just a little maybe is under the elected official position part. Item number 1, official city social media sites should not be used for campaigning purposes. To allow the general public to follow or like elected individuals, in essence, is a campaign, in my opinion, is a campaign type function. So I wouldn't allow following or liking of individual elected members.
Okay, I guess I'm confused.
They can like a project, they can follow a project. But I don't think the site should be used to try to build a base of public support for any elected individual.
I don't believe we're doing that. I think
No, I don't think we are, but if we leave it so that you can follow or like an elected individual, do we then encourage that?
I think we are very cautious during election season, from the time that filing opens until, you know, the polls close, to be very cautious that any elected officials' comments that we are commenting on are very, very basic and harmless. So the mayor might go to a ribbon cutting ceremony for a new business in town, and he might tweet something like, congratulations to, you know, new business A for their grand opening today. And we will retweet that so that the message goes not only to the mayor's individual followers, but to those that are following the city accounts as well. If it had been phrased by an elected official of, you know, look at this great business that's come to Shakopee because of everything I've done, if you want more of this, vote for me, we would not retweet that. There certainly is room where you, in the current policy language, where you are trusting the discretion of, the staff that have access to these accounts. If there's a majority of you that aren't comfortable with allowing that discretion and you want to rein that in, then that would certainly be the council's purview if a majority of you are of that opinion.
So I guess my main point with it is not, I didn't mean to get into the weeds about it, but what my main point on it was the fact that it's not, the policy isn't set up to promote community building and engagement and proactive use of social media for community outreach and talking to people and having conversations and things like that. And I just wanted to get council's thoughts. Is that what the city should be doing with social media and utilizing those types of communication for those kinds of things, or is where we're at where we'd like to be? I just wanted to get general thoughts on that topic.
I think we should change the name, city media instead of social media.
Okay, noted. Next.
Well, really, we're trying to use this to communicate with the citizens of Shakopee on city-related matters. It's not really I don't see it as a site to just sit there for a night and engage it in a conversation about, the new shuttles going to Mars or something or whatever that doesn't really pertain to the city.
But on the flip side of that, if that's what residents, I'm not saying that specific topic is something, but any topic that residents are concerned about or want to talk about, we should be there to have those conversations with them. If they're at social media, we should be where the residents and where our businesses are.
I think it has to be related to Shakopee. If they want to talk about a pothole in Belle Plaine, it's really,
I'm not.
it's kind of focused more on Shakopee issues, I think.
That's what I'm talking about as well. So people have, question about dog park, utilizing social media to have really good conversations with people about dog, and not just social media, but using blogs, and like Northfield, for example, is doing a phenomenal job using technology and incorporating their website and social media. The county just did this as well. They used a program to really have a lot of online engagement about the sales tax for the county, and it incorporated social media, incorporated their website. Is that a direction where we see us going? Is that too far ahead? I just wanted to get people's thoughts on it. Councilor Whiting.
I think we've been fairly controlled with our social media up to this point. I think we can feel a little freer with some of the department heads and people we have in charge of this. Kristen, I think giving some more latitude here. We haven't crossed any minefields yet that I know of, but I think we should approve this. I like the direction we're going, but with guarded approach.
Right. And I'm not saying by any means that we wouldn't approve this. I'm just having conversation because I think it's an important one for us to have in direction.
Mayor, let's ask if a citizen wanted to go on to the city's site, and the way I read it now, they can do that. They can initiate the contact. They can come on and say, the dog park is built. I used it for the last 3 weeks. It's great, blah, 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 blah. I'm not sure what the rule is on this. And somebody else is going to chime in, probably from the city, and say, here's what the rule is on this and that. And what did you like, what did you didn't like? And then there's going to be this dialogue.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lehman, that's correct. In some ways, that's exactly what this policy is doing. When we started off our Facebook site in 2010, the only people that could initiate a post were the city could initiate one. One of the things we were concerned about is people using the city's Facebook page to either, bash an individual police officer that just gave them a speeding ticket, or maybe, posting, I lost my dog in Shakopee, does anybody seen Fluffy, and that we would end up with all of this extraneous type of things that maybe interfered with our ability to communicate city news and information through the site. So we started off that way. The primary purpose of bringing an amended policy to you tonight is to lift that, because that hasn't been a problem too much for other cities over the years. Quite honestly, we lifted that 6 months ago on kind of a trial basis to see how it would go, and it's been fine. We haven't had people, starting really random or way out there topics of conversations. But so the direct answer to your question is, with your approval of this policy tonight and the continuation of what we've put on in a trial basis for the last couple months, any citizen could come to the city's Facebook page, post a comment about pretty much anything under the sun. Other citizens and members of the public, whether they be Shakopee citizens or not, could see that, could respond to that, and the conversation could proceed. The city could choose to jump in and add our 2 cents from the city's official login, answer a question, clarify a fact, direct people to a section of our website where they might find a particular piece of information that seems relevant to the conversation. Or the city staff could choose to just stay out of it and let the conversation play out without maybe a city staff person needing to get involved. It's gonna depend on the subject matter being discussed and whether or not we have anything nonpartisan and relevant to add to the conversation.
All right. I'll entertain a motion. I just wanted to put it out there that I feel like we can continue to push further from where we're at right now and engage people and have more discussions using technology was my main point, that we can continue to push that and get more active in social media as a city. All right, do we have any motion for this one? Councilor Whiting?
I'll offer Resolution 7453, a resolution amending Resolution number 7072, a resolution adopting a social media policy for the city of Shakopee, and move its adoption.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Entertain a motion to recess to Economic Development Authority meeting. Anyone? Councilor Mokel.
I'll make a motion to,
To do something.
I was moving to adjourn for the Economic Development Authority meeting.
To recess.
Recess, sorry.
Yes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. President Lehman.
Secretary, please note the roll.
Yes, Mr. President.
Agenda should be in front of everybody. It's a pretty light agenda. Motion to approve would be in order.
So moved.
Mr. Whiting, is there a second? Second by Mr. Luce. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Consent agenda, what do we have? Minutes and bills. Kathy?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
That's seconded by Mr. Tabke.
Seconded.
Any discussion? The one bill list didn't have what it was for on there, but it was pretty small, so I don't think it's really pressing. Is it the first one? Yeah, the first one. Jim should know, it's Kennedy and Graven.
Billable hours, just say that.
Slush fund?
It's the 20941, is that the one you're talking about? Without looking at it, I don't know which, it's probably just general EDA.
Sure it was important.
All right.
Oh, Julie's.
President Lehman and members of the EDA, that is related to some work that was done in March specific to a review of some items from Shutterfly.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. And a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Ready?
I'll move to adjourn to Tuesday, June 17th, 2014 at 7 p.m.
And a second?
I'll second.
Kathy Mokel, second. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
All right, we reconvene the Shakopee City Council meeting and move on to item number 10A1, 2013 Annual Financial Report and Audit Presentation and Review by staff from KDV.
Mayor and Council, before you this evening is the completion of the annual audit process. With me this evening is Steve Wishman from the audit firm of Kern, DeVere, Winter, KDV. And they are a firm that has worked with the city for many years. We have a long history with them. They are a group that we work closely with, not just during audit time, but throughout the year as we are dealing with many of the new issues that surface, whether it's relating to conduit debt, which you have seen tonight, issues that come forward relating to full disclosures, a lot of the information that we provide in the footnotes and management discussion and analysis. He has a short presentation tonight that he will discuss with you, and I will let him take this as soon as I pull this up, wherever it went. And it'll be a short PowerPoint. There are many slides on this PowerPoint. We really, at this point, will not be going through all of them. And let me pull this up somewhere. Okay. She says with concern. Yeah, there we go. And Mr. Wishman will be available to answer any questions. Would you like to have them during your discussion? or hold?
Absolutely. Yep, anytime would be great.
And very informal, lots of questions I'm sure you'll have.
Thanks so much, Julie and Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you for putting me on the end of the agenda tonight as well. I do appreciate that. Had a prior commitment in the area, but again, thanks so much. So we'll get this started here. Again, I just want, before I get started on my presentation, I'd just like to thank Julie and her staff for the excellent audit process. And, you know, it is a check and balance that you have in your, you know, financial reporting to say, you know, independent auditors come in, look at your financial statements. First of all, you prepared, your finance team prepared your financial statement. It was our job to provide an opinion on those financial statements. And we'll go through the opinion that we're issuing, which is the unmodified or clean report. But it really is your team throughout the year that's keeping the accurate records, that's doing the year-end reconciliations, that's putting this comprehensive report together, and then ready for us to do, for the audit process. So, you know, there's all the thanks need to go internally to to Julie and her staff for that process. So again, just want to thank her and Melissa very much, and their team for all, and everybody in the city for that part. So as far as the audit process, very briefly, I just want to talk that it does start actually before year end. Probably in November of the year, we start looking at your council minutes actually that are online to kind of get a flavor as to what's happened in the city this year, what kind of audit risks there are. Every audit is planned differently every year, so that we look at every risk, do a risk assessment each and every year for each and every client of ours. And we do work with about 65 cities in the state. So we know there's some common themes, but yet there's always something a little bit different for each city. So it is a unique individual audit risk assessment that provides our audit plan. That's done shortly after year end. We then come do the field testing, usually spend a good part of a week or so doing all the testing. That's the verification from third parties of taxes and assessments, confirmation of banks and investment brokers of the cash and investment balances, things of that nature, to really verify the amounts on the financial statements. We did have a draft of the comprehensive report when we were on site doing the field work, which was excellent. We then, the staff just cleaned that up, looked at the final reports, and then we're here tonight for the council presentation. Again, I'm pleased to report that in the comprehensive annual financial report, which is the large document that you likely have in PDF format, it's about 130 pages, we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That is the highest level we can issue, the best you can receive. This will be submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association for their Certificate of Excellence, which you've received for a number of years. We've gone through that checklist, believe it is in compliance with that as well. So not a lot of significant changes there, but there are you know, a few things that are added every year that I just that will touch on very briefly, really just changing some terminology within the financial statements. As far as the other reports that are issued, there's a report on compliance with Minnesota legal compliance and then government auditing standards. And again, nothing to report on from a legal compliance standpoint. As far as the government auditing standards, this is where any of the internal control type items are reported. And you're going to notice that of the 5 things on the screen here, one of them is new, 3 of them are carryovers from prior years, and the very bottom one was a internal control item that we recommended that's actually been corrected. So again, very common type of things that we have listed here, and I'll briefly go through those. We had 2 audit adjustments that we posted this year. One was related to sewer fund revenues, and one was related to a vacation accrual amount. And the thing to me that's important is if I look at, is this a systemic error or adjustment, or is that something kind of a one-time audit adjustment? It really was kind of a unique in both circumstances, so we really feel like your processes are good. It's just that there was 2 of them that we had to record in the audited financial statements. So to me, it's more isolated than systemic. I think that's probably the important thing for you to know as a council, that you can continue to rely on your information you receive in your council packets to make good budget decisions throughout the year. The middle 3 are actually carryovers from prior years. The first one is a lack of segregation of accounting duties. That is a middle level or significant deficiency standpoint, and that's really just because of the limited staff you have for all the various accounting duties. Not practical to correct from a cost-benefit standpoint. For those of you that heard me last year, same type of comment. Really, without investing significant dollars in personnel, you would not be able to get rid of this particular comment. Very common for all the cities that we work with. So again, not recommending you change anything, just realize there are those inherent limitations in the segregation of accounting duties. The other 2 are your decentralized receiving points, the ice arena and community center. Those are the lowest level or deficiency items, and what those are really just reminders to make sure that there's good checks and balances on your decentralized activities, to make sure there's more than one person involved in the recording, processing, reconciliation, part of those particular receiving functions, both at the ice arena and the community center. A little more detail on that communications letter. Again, a very standard comment, and it is the lowest level, but it is something to keep in mind because it is decentralized, and that you know, there's not as many reconciling procedures there as there are in City Hall. So again, just recommending that you continue to evaluate that. I know Julie's got that on her radar to kind of continue to look at that and see if there's anything better that can be done to kind of keep those controls segregated and the reconciliation process. So. And then finally, the one that was corrected that we had commented on prior years, and again, I just like you. The reason I'm mentioning it tonight is because I think it's noteworthy for you to know that you're taking corrective action on things that we tell you about in prior audits, and there's the fee schedule and the calculation of some of the license and permits type things didn't exactly match that fee schedule. We did retest that area this year and found that to be corrected, so I just wanted to comment on that briefly as well. I'd like to get in briefly in the financial reporting then of the financial statements, and this just looks at the general fund in very summarized format. As you see, for 2013, there was both an increase in revenues and expenditures. Revenues were up about 1.1 million. Expenditures were up about 900,000. Your fund balance remains at $9,092,989. You notice that is a drop from last year's $9,522,841, but is still in compliance with your goal for fund balance in the general fund. The reason why, you may be asking, well, if revenues were higher than expenditures, why did the fund balance go down? And the answer, the quick answer is there was a transfer out of the general fund to fund some of the other funds of the city, and that was about $3.8 million that was transferred out to other various funds. So that's the reason for that, and I just wanted to mention that. As you notice, since 2010, your fund balance has remained very consistent in that $9 to $9.5 million range. So again, that balance at the end of 2013, certainly a reasonable, not excessive, and it is right in the range of the state auditor's recommendation of between 35 and 50%. So I wanted just to point that out as well, that when you benchmark it with some of the other standards of the Office of State Auditor, that again is right in line with where that should be. Again, general fund performance from a budget to actual standpoint, I'm going to skip a couple slides here, but as you look at the revenues and the expenditures, the first column is the budget column, the second one is the actual and the variance. So as you see, budget-wise, the revenues were over budget by about $1.6 million. Most of that in the taxes and assessment line, for some collection of certain assessments and delinquent taxes. Your charges for services were the next one that were over budget by about $452,000. And the other one I just wanted to comment on is miscellaneous revenue. You do see that was under by $183,000. That was a result of the market value of the investments at year end. We do need to mark those to the market value. And that was kind of a point in time where the portfolios of all the cities were lower than their actual costs. So there was a bit of a recognition of that temporary loss. The thing I want to mention is it is your intent to hold those to maturity where you will receive the full value. So it is just kind of a temporary timing dip, if you want to say, that affected that miscellaneous revenue category. As far as the expenditures, all the categories were under budget. As you see, total expenditures were under budget by about $946,311. So every department contributed to the underspending, if you want to say, from a budgetary standpoint. Because of the very positive operations, you see that there was a small transfer in, but a $3.9 million transfer out to fund other various funds, bringing that change in fund balance from the 9.5 to about that $9 million. So budget process is very good. No concerns that I see from our auditor's standpoint. Again, excellent work from a budget to actual analysis there. As I mentioned, the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, state auditor recommends between 35 and 50%. For 2013, you're at 46%. You've seen a high of 67% and a low of 44% in 2010. So again, very, very reasonable range, right in the range where the state auditor recommends. Certainly very prudent to maintain that for economic slowdown and potential state delays in some of their intergovernmental aids, et cetera. So right where it should be. Very briefly, the general fund revenues, we talked about the total revenues, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor as to where the composition of those revenues. $15.6 million of taxes and assessments recognized this year. That is up from about 14.7. Intergovernmental up a little bit, just over $1 million. Most of that is police and fire aid. Your license and permits did increase by about $200,000 as well. A very good year. As you see over the 5-year period, that's the highest level of revenue recognized in license and permits. Fines and forfeits were pretty consistent, down just a little bit. Charges for services were up about $270,000 to $4.3 million, and that is the highest level as you see over the period as well. And then the miscellaneous down a little bit because of that market value change in your investment portfolio. I should mention too that we looked at the portfolio at March 31st and it had rebounded quite nicely. So it really was a very temporary, just a couple month mark-to-market issue there. I'd like to continue on then with just the taxable tax capacity, certified levy. Really the top bar that's going down is your taxable tax capacity. As you see, as you've seen from all cities, the valuations have been going down. Your high point on 09 is about 41 million, now at 32 million. Certified levy, again, right in that 15 million range, has been 14.9 in 2009, down to 14.7, now at 15.3. So certified levy's been very, very consistent over the period as well. So just shows you've done a very good job maintaining that tax levy, even with the reduction in the taxable tax capacity. As a result of that capacity going down, the rate has actually been increasing, not necessarily because you've raised the tax levy, but because of just the numerator denominator in that calculation. So, but for 2013, the tax capacity rate is at 42, and the average is about 46 for the 7-county metro area. So you are still below that by about 4 percentage points. So I wanted to point that out as well tonight. Just take a quick peek at your enterprise funds, sewer fund. For 2013, operating revenues were $2,973,000. Expenses were $4,122,000. That compares to operating revenues last year of about $3.7 million, expenses of $3,953,000. So you did show a bit of a decline from your revenue side. Pretty consistent. We've seen that in all of our cities that we audit. Fairly wet year for 2013, along with conservation programs and those types of things that have kind of affected that as well. So we have seen most of the sewer fund revenues declining. But again, back more normalized to the 2011 revenue stream, so I just wanted to point that out as well. So there was a bit of an operating loss in the sewer fund of about $1 million this year, which we'll certainly continue to evaluate from a revenue side as we go forward. Sewer fund remains in healthy position though, plenty of cash and net assets as well. So just kind of a temporary decline from a revenue standpoint there in 2013. Storm drainage fund, pretty consistent operations on the revenue side. Charges for services are only up about $10,000. Operating expenses, $1,604,000. That's up a little over $100,000 from last year. Operating loss of $557,000, but when you add all the non-operating, pretty much broke even. The change from last year to this year was a $3,004 loss. So that particular fund, it had very stable operations for 2013.
We got a question up here, Councilor Lehman.
Yes. If we can go back to the sewer fund.
Sure.
The operating loss, is that, how am I gonna say this? If we do a big sewer project, out of sewer fund dollars, like L16 or something like that, that shows up as a big expense at one point. It's a snapshot big expense that you're not gonna see for another 15, 20 years. Does that make this look like that?
Would that be a capital type of project that you're referring to?
So it would be, but it would be funded out of the sewer fund.
Okay, so what would happen then is it really wouldn't show up as an operating expense, but it would get capitalized as an asset.
Okay.
So you'd be basically trading cash for infrastructure, sewer lines, whatever that would be.
Okay.
So that really wouldn't reflect in the operations of it,
Okay.
other than the increase in the capital assets would increase your depreciation then that you would charge in the future for that large project.
Which would show up in here.
Correct, and that would be under the depreciation line item. Depreciation for 2013 is about $733,000. So you could, if you put in a very large project, you could take probably 1/40th of that roughly, and that would be the amount that would get added to the depreciation in the sewer fund for that.
All right.
But the sewer fund itself does have about $15.5 million of cash reserves. So what you would do is you draw that down and replace it with an asset of, infrastructure. A couple final comments. The city bond ratings, just got this updated from S&P, Moody's, and again, you're in the most common 30.3% level. Just wanted to kind of show you where that is. I don't know if that's changed at all since the city of Detroit has gone through their troubles, but we'll take a look at that and continue to. But again, very, very favorable from a bond rating perspective, the city with all the growth you've had. Again, very, very quickly, to me the important number here is the top line. That just shows your total debt load. For 2013, it's $16,990,000. That's down from $19 million. That's actually a fairly manageable and low number. And it's almost, 2011 was $16,145,000. So you've done quite nicely managing your debt. And it's the other thing that's even better news, in my opinion, is you look at how quickly that 16.9 is going to get paid off, and most of it's going to be paid off by 2018. So you've got a fairly short term, if you want to say, for the long-term debt of the city. Give you a little more flexibility, to obviously, for future improvement type things with potential debt fundings there as well. So the last couple things I just wanted to point out. This is just some per capita information for governmental funds. Governmental funds being your general fund, special revenue, debt service, capital projects. This just shows outstanding debt, total revenues, tax revenues, and capital outlay. Yours is the far left. Just compares to 3 other cities in your approximate area. Lower debt load, lower on the revenue side, lower on the tax revenue, and capital outlay can vary significantly from year to year. You had a fairly quiet year, so that was only at $57 per capita. So this just kind of shows that your very much in line with other cities when it comes to per capita from a revenue and a tax standpoint, and you're significantly lower from an outstanding debt standpoint, which is certainly a positive. Finally, just shows from an expenditures in the general fund, just again, one more barometer. Yours is the far left column again. Expenditures at 494, a little higher than the other three. Revenues are 575. This is just the general fund now, and then the tax revenues are fairly close to Savage and Chaska's running a little bit lower. So it just gives you a little bit of comparison with some of your neighbor cities, and these are all very, very much in line with where they should be. Obviously, you're all in different stages of growth, development and things, so it's really hard to compare them apples to apples, but it does just give you a little bit of flavor, kind of how your neighbors are showing. These are statistics from the state auditor's report that they put out every year. Obviously, the latest we have is 2012. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much. Questions?
Councilor Lehman.
Couple of them, Mayor. Make sure I get this all correct. On your comprehensive report,
Yes.
on statistical section, page 121.
And I have a draft version. I'm just looking, make sure, is it the table 14 that you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I reading this right to say that in 2013, our per capita income is less than 4, 5, 6, and 7? So our per capita income has dropped after the housing collapse and hasn't recovered yet.
Yes, that would be my assessment of it as well.
Okay? And at the same token, is it fair to say that our total tax capacity has decreased by $8 million?
Yeah, let me grab that particular.
That was in the last slideshow that you just showed.
Yep. Yeah, let's go back to that. Find that real quick here. Yeah, from roughly 41 million to 33 million. Yeah.
So our tax capacity dropped by 8 million. Our income, per capita income is down to just before the collapse pricing of 08. And our tax rate went up 6 points.
Yeah, and the tax rate went up, even though your levy stayed the same, because the capacity is down. The percentage just had to go up to compensate for the reduction in the tax capacity, correct?
And from a household standpoint, I kind of, the name fits. In layman's terms, the way I see it is, if you have a $100,000 house and you're paying $500 taxes on it, and now the $100,000 house is worth $50,000 and you're still paying $500 taxes on it, your rate of taxation has basically gone up.
Yeah, from a
Which is what we're seeing, except it's not double.
Right. Yep.
Good analogy? Okay.
Can I ask a question though on the demographics, the table 14 that we just talked about? Was that, so that's per capita income, but our number of kids in school has gone up by, we've had a lot of kids in Shakopee over the last 5 years, and they've gone up by 3,300 kids. That would dramatically affect the per capita income, correct?
Yeah, I believe it would. I'd have to actually look back into the Bureau statistics and if they factor that in or out, or if they count them whole or half or none. I would have to circle back on that, to be honest with you.
It's got the school enrollment in there, and it's got the unemployment rate. So if you go back to 06, before the collapse, you can see the difference in unemployment rate and the difference in.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the kids don't make any money, so they reduce the per
Right.
capita income.
True.
And I like the table 15 was a nice table to put in there too. The job, where they were, where they are.
Further questions? I've got one question for you. What, something that's been talked about quite a bit the last few years since I've been here is the controls and not that we've had deficiencies in as many of the controls, but just how we handle things internally as staff. Has, in your opinion, that been going in the right direction as to how we handle money internally and those kinds of things? We've been going, are we about where we need to be, or does it need to continue, or how are we internal control wise?
Sure. I would say that over the last, 5 years, you've made improvement in the controls. You continue to analyze how you do business, how to do it more efficiently and more effectively. There's a point in time where you're not going to be able to get any more effectiveness or efficiency out of it without hiring more people, which from a cost benefit standpoint, is not feasible. And you're probably very close to that point. So you've made some really significant improvements. And there's just some things that probably won't get fixed without significant investment, which would not be cost beneficial to you. So that's how I would say you continue to analyze, say, how can we do it better with the people that we have? And that's very important too, because it does change. Information technology will change the way you do business every day, every month, every year, and you continue to analyze that as well. But yeah, you're certainly on the right track. You continue to assess it, and I think you're very, very close to the point where there's not a lot more you can do.
Councilor Whiting.
First of all, I want to congratulate all departments for being under budget. And Julie, congratulations on another wonderful review. I have a question on, I don't recall seeing the ice arena and community center concerns on there in the past. Has it been on there in the past?
It has.
It's been on there for a long time, yeah.
Is there something are we working on that issue?
We added a software program for receivables just a couple years ago. And that probably helped us. Sorry to jump in, Mayor, I'm just going back to history,
Yeah.
but the problem that we have up there is you have the person at the counter collecting, and what they would like to see is they would like to see like 3 people there. One collects it, one rectifies it, and one takes it from there and does the next process, which is not financially feasible, and it doesn't really make sense from a realistic standpoint to have 3 people standing there to do that. You could possibly put one person in the back doing all the rectification of both the ice arena and the front desk separately from the people collecting at the ice arena and at the front desk. That would be another step.
And down here to account for it.
Down here, you get the front desk person collecting minimal dollars.
I meant then the receipts from the community center would come here to be accounted.
Or rectified, yep.
Well, just curious, I don't recall seeing that, but evidently I missed
We've been hit on this for 13 years now.
Okay, well.
It is just that's with the decentralized nature of it. I'm actually a fraud examiner as well and a forensic accountant, and the decentralized activities have a inherently higher risk, just because their Big Brother isn't watching every day, or in that respect. So that's one reason why we continue to analyze it. It is an audit risk area that we look at. So that's kind of why it's been in there, and we continue to evaluate it and say, do you have good checks and balances? Is there more you can do to tighten that up? And I think there's still a little bit more you can do. And I know Julie and our audit team and Melissa have talked, through that. And I think there's some good things that you can do relatively easily that can, again, put one more step in there to help that.
Thanks, Steve.
Any further questions? All right. Congratulations. Great job, everyone. Is there anything that we need to adopt with this?
Just to follow up, once this has been reviewed with council, we submit a report to the Office of the State Auditor that provides a summary report. We also submit this to the Governmental Finance Officers Association, who, by the way, are having their national conference in downtown Minneapolis right now. And this is a program that will be wrapped up and submitted in final format by June 1st.
I do have one last question for the auditor guy.
Yes, sir.
So how do we work around the challenge of the state telling us that they would like to see us have this type of between here and here cash flow position, and then having them turn around and say, gee, you've got too much, we're going to take some of it from you now?
Boy, if I had the answer to that, I don't have an answer to that. That's just, you know, it's a best practice that they say, and I think if you follow that best practice, you're,
That's like telling the federal government telling you how to balance a checkbook, right?
yeah,
Okay?
exactly. There are, you know, you hear from time to time, there can be those risks, but, yeah, that's just I don't have a good answer for it.
All right.
I wish I did.
Any other questions?
Would you like a motion, Julie?
That'd be wonderful.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the 2013 Comprehensive Audit and Financial Report and Audit Findings and the presentation.
Thank you very much, Councilor Lehman. Do we have a second? Second by Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just also want to take a moment, we got a fabulous finance staff in the upstairs, and they did an amazing job this year and added one more element in the fact that typically KDV prepares this and puts it in the book format, and everything was done in-house this year. And the audit quote that we received recommended that, and that's what we did. It's there in front of you.
Nice.
Yeah, a big thanks to my staff, because they really put their time and their effort into this.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, 10D1, E1, E2, all were approved in consent. So we're going to move to 10F1, revision of the City Code, Section 11.60, Subdivision 9, Tree Management Regulations. Mr. Buzian.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is an item that we've seen a couple times. It was tabled from May 6th, and I'll just outline a few of the major changes since the last time you guys saw it, and then I'll open it up for questions. So, the main thing that was changed is for commercial industrial development, this ordinance will only apply to developments that fall within the natural resources corridor as defined by the natural resources corridor map that was attached. It will not apply to commercial industrial developments outside of that. It didn't change for the residential. The residential still applies for all developments. As requested the last meeting, the preservation credits that are received in the landscaping ordinance were also added in here just to make everyone who reads it aware. And one thing that I was gonna point out, that was my mistake, I didn't strike out one of the paragraphs in the attached ordinance in B regulations. I meant to strike out the entire thing, so it actually has a duplicate of it in there. So I was just gonna
All right, walk us through that again.
let you know that. So regulations, B, the attached proposed ordinance, the second paragraph, the entire thing should be struck. So the two underlined paragraphs, those were the only two that were added. And I don't know how I missed striking that
This or
paragraph.
just this one?
But it's pretty much a duplicate
Yep, that one
paragraph that
goes.
shouldn't be in there. Yep, I can do that. So this paragraph right here should just be struck. These are the only two that should be added. Just to clarify that.
All right.
Okay.
Councilor Lehman.
My concern was that if we look at the map that you have attached here, we could have commercial industrial land in different locations, and based on what happens to be on them today, one could be penalized compared to another.
If it's within the natural resources corridor, it would be subject to this ordinance, that's correct.
Right, so we are basically making, and I'm back to the argument we had last time around, or the discussion we had, where if we zone a property commercial industrial, wherever it may be, we intend it to have commercial industrial on it. So, how do we give an incentive, which we did, to keep some of the better trees where they fit within the commercial industrial development?
Mr. Mayor and
I think,
Councilor Lehman, hopefully that's something that's addressed in the proposed ordinance is specific trees get more of a weight than other trees. As far as applying it to some properties and not to others, I guess that was based off of a fairly in-depth analysis of the city's natural resources and what we wanted to make a priority to save, and areas that I don't want to say we didn't care about, but that weren't as important to us. So
Well, but
that's a decision that that you will all have to make if these areas are more valuable than others.
Mayor, if we're gonna zone some commercial industrial, we need to allow commercial industrial to happen. And some of these properties that are in the corridor area, they're tied by this, because if they're heavily treed, and we know that when you build a commercial industrial thing, you're gonna have the big parking lot, you're gonna have the big box or whatever, they're just totally hamstrung compared to a same lot somewhere else that doesn't happen to have a whole lot of trees on it. So, you know, if we could go back in time and say we're not gonna zone anywhere where there's trees, commercial, industrial, although from a road standpoint, that probably won't make sense, but it's just kind of a dilemma that we find ourselves in, and I don't wanna hamstring one over the other and make one easier to develop compared to another, or make one, what do you call it, when it's harder to develop, so.
One comment on that, Mayor. So we still do allow 60% of tree removal, and to remind you, that's not 60% of the entire area, that's 60% of the diameter inches on that site. We really don't have a lot of commercial industrial sites that are entirely wooded, and I got that 60% from a number of other cities that I've talked to that have had ordinances similar to this with that same percentage, and so that they fairly rarely have tree replacement and are able to develop those sites. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Can I ask a question about the natural resources corridor map on here? How often does this get updated, and what was it based on when it was created?
I can, I'll actually pull up a presentation for that I was gonna go through at the end, but I think it would be worthwhile to,
Okay.
So here's some of the background of the natural resources corridor. It started out in 2002 with an inventory. There were quite a few partners in it. It started out as the Greenway corridor. It was approved by City Council unanimously in May of 2008, or rather the natural resources design criteria, which this is incorporated into, is approved in 2008. The actual map was approved in 2005. Some of the partners that we use in that, along with a private contractor that I believe was hired to put a lot of it together, with the help of the EAC and some of the other commissions and board, were the township, Scott County, Shakopee Sioux Community, the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed, and you can read the rest of them. So some of the things that it addresses are, it takes into account some sensitive areas in lakes and streams, wetlands, woodlands, upland vegetation, wildlife habitat, endangered and threatened species, steep slopes and bluffs, recreational opportunities, accessibility, infrastructure, and connectivity. So I think it identified some of the more sensitive areas, more valuable areas to the community based on those things that are within the design criteria, and it's meant to actually be a corridor for wildlife and a number of other things to move throughout the city and decrease fragmentation. And again, this is something that I wasn't a part of. It was before I came here, and I'm still kind of learning what the background is. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of the history of it.
Yeah, so how often does it get updated?
I don't believe the map has been updated since.
Okay. Because, like, at what is now 21 and 169 there, it's got the good category, I think it is, on just open farmland on that in there, on the southeast section there. And that's happened since, there were trees there, but that's happened since this was created. So I'm just wondering how we apply that to current standards.
So you're saying the site has been developed, or it's just been cleared due to agricultural
It was
uses or
turned
something?
into agricultural uses, correct?
That's something that, well, if it was completely cleared, I guess there wouldn't really, and it was a farm field, there aren't any regulations that I could think of would apply in the design criteria. So, I'll let.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. To address it a little bit, we haven't updated the map per se to reflect the development that's gone in those areas. However, the map's been used for every one of those developments that's gone in. So we can look back into, we keep files of every development that's gone in, how it's related to what the tree replacement was, you know, what the steep slopes and bluffs were that were preserved or that were altered in any way that we approved through council. For instance, the Dakota Crossing housing development did have a steep slope and bluff, but because of drainage and requirements that they had to put certain pipings in, that was an approval by City Council and the EAC to remove an excess of some of those trees that would typically be required to be saved in the natural resources corridor design criteria. And then they had higher stipulations for tree replacement within those first 10 lots where those were. So although the map doesn't necessarily reflect that now there's a housing development here, so the tree is less, it still falls within that corridor where it's still a high priority. And then we've used that map as we've gone through those developments and documented how those developments were affected or changed by, you know, what was in there. So it just helps us as that working document, but if that answers your question, it goes along with the development that's current there, and we can track it that way.
Okay. Other questions? Councilor Luce?
I think a lot of this is being done backwards. I think we need to give the developers credit for what they saved, not making them count every tree and everything. Let's do it at the end. You know, whatever's left there, we give them credit for. If they have what's called a heritage tree, give them extra credit. You know, and if they use it as a focal point for a planting, give them more credit. I mean, going in and making them count trees just makes no sense to me.
Well, with this change, that's exactly what we're doing, unless it's within the natural resources corridor.
I say do it there too.
Councilor Whiting?
No, I think this natural resources corridors and these maps, you know, obviously some have changed over time, but these represent our woodland assets. There's some beautiful trees out there. You can't get them back unless you plant, you know, over a lot of pieces, a long period of time. There's small pockets of trees, you know. I think what we've done is we've gone quite a ways with the commercial industrial land and giving them a break on the tree management program. And some of the properties here that do represent, you know, the natural resources corridors, that's some of the special areas that are going to need to take a little bit more time because they are fully treed, and we do want to preserve them. Now, they still, as mentioned, still can take up to 60% of it to use, and they can take all the area of the building, as I recall.
For residential
Well, that's
sites, they
residential, okay,
can
but
take everything.
still, you're giving them quite a bit of leeway for the building, and then even if they do take the trees, you know, that just goes into the replacement part of that. So I think we've pushed this pretty far, and I would hate to go any farther with some of these natural resources areas.
Councilor Luce?
I think if anybody that's been here for a long time, if you go south of town, take an area of 5 square miles maybe, not even 4 square miles. There are way more trees today than there were back when that was all farmland. I've been here that long. You could go back there and you could look 3 miles and you'd see a few trees, but it was all farmland. Now it's all houses, and most of those houses have 5 trees per lot, if not more. We've
Okay.
gained, we didn't take away.
Any further questions?
I would just, Mayor, I would just say where we do wanna make the trade-off is if we're gonna zone property commercial industrial, then we need to allow commercial industrial to go there without a hardship. If we don't want commercial industrial there, then we shouldn't zone it that way.
Mr. Soltow is here tonight. Do you want to talk? You bet. I figured so.
Steve Soltel, Shakopee Crossings. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again tonight. I've been coming to these meetings for over 20 years now. And it's interesting when it comes up about the evolution of the natural resources map and the design criteria. The design criteria, I forget, when I was here last time, I had the entire printout and the number of pages, and you get lost in the index. It's largely a reprint of a lot of material that's been provided by the state and applies to a lot of different applications, all the above. I get lost in it, and I feel like the application of the natural resources corridor to commercial industrial is giving with one hand and taking away on the other. It's almost like a sandbag. We're not getting what we're trying to do. And I've talked to you early on about we're either providing incentives or disincentives. And if one ordinance doesn't apply and another one does, you're still getting a cost impact and a detriment to development on commercial industrial. So it comes back to that core question, what do you want? Our area was included. You can see the area around 169 and 21, east of 169. Has 2 outlots now that are still heavily wooded. There's a character there, but I would also point out, if you go to the natural resources map, the ponds behind Sam's and Walmart, stormwater ponds are included in natural resources mapping. This mapping was done without, I don't remember how it actually was laid out and where it came from, and then it's got different levels of quality too, and how and where those levels apply. I don't think I'm a dumb guy. I can't make sense of it, frankly. In some aspects, I don't know if it applies or not. I know when it's a certain quality, it absolutely applies. But I think it just comes back to this core question. I really do, and I won't banter on it any further than that. It's incentive or a disincentive, and where do we want to go? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Where are we going to go with it? Folks? Councilor Whiting.
Well, let's start with offering to adopt ordinance number 883, an ordinance of the city of Shakopee amending section 11.60, subdivision 9, Shakopee City Code, tree management regulations.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Discussion.
I still say we're going through it backwards.
Yep, I agree. We're either gonna have commercial industrial on these properties, or we're gonna
You
zone
want
something
development
different.
or not?
But what's your answer then?
Well, my answer is to recognize that there's a trade-off. If you want this, you're gonna have to not have this. If you want this, then you're not gonna have this.
Councilor Whiting.
That's exactly what we're doing here. We're offering commercial industrial, but when you have this, the trees in the natural resources area, you have to utilize some of the different language and utilize some of the different rules that we have to try and protect them. Now, it doesn't mean you can't take them, but you do have to put back, a certain amount. So.
Well, Mayor, I view it like this. A permit to shingle your house is $45. It's $85. Why? Well, because you're special. Which is basically what we're doing. We're saying, here's a commercial industrial property, here's a commercial industrial property. This property has no trees on it. This guy can go and build it, no hoops to jump through, no charges to hire somebody to measure caliper inches, to mark all these things and go through all this. This guy has to do all of that. So this property this property to develop equally to this property is substantially more expensive.
And that's why
So-
we've been doing it since 2008.
So, and which I don't agree with. So either you want this property to develop like this property equally, or you don't. And that's where I'm at. So I want to put them both on the same playing field.
My thoughts on that are that we have areas of the city. Most of that, in my opinion, is the bluff line that needs to be protected, and it needs to be. Well, it also goes all the way right through the middle of town as well. And so we have to have a mechanism to be able to do that. Now, my discussion, Jacob, could you put the natural resources corridor up here? Is this the same one?
This was another map I was going to show you. It just has another layer with the added commercial industrial zoning. So you can look at this one or a different one.
Could you tell us the
This
color?
one, oh, best is, okay, that's,
Blow it up at all?
red is good, yellow is better, green is best
I can
on here.
blow it up if you would like here. I have to open it up in another
Okay,
Commercial industrial is
Where's
what
commercial
color?
industrial?
Yeah.
What color is that?
1 second here.
Light industrial is pink.
Look
No,
how
I'm like-
cute we
Sorry,
are all
this
up here.
is-
We're all,
It's a lot of stuff to put on this map, but
yeah, let's just go to the natural resources corridor one if you got
okay.
that. All right, so now with this, oh, this one's different than what we've got in here too.
This is the approved
Okay.
one. I've
Um,
been trying to make them a little more visually easy to look at and identify.
All right, got it. So my biggest concern is, like I said, along the buff line and where we've got oak trees, and those types of areas are my biggest concern. Jacob, what would you think about limiting it just to like the better and best or the best for the natural resources corridor to apply there? What would that do to us?
I think that would allow for a lot more fragmentation and really compromise something that took a lot of time and a lot of city money to come up with, and that previous councils made a priority and was part of our comprehensive plan, but it's not my decision.
Yeah, and I just don't know what the ramifications of that are. So that's what I'm.
I'm not,
Previous councils can't bind future councils unless it's
I can't tell you the full ramifications of that. I know a lot more than just woodlands are taken into consideration with this map.
Okay, Mr. Leak?
I apologize for weighing in, but I think it's fairly simple to understand what the ramifications are. I was here for the development of both the inventory, and remember, the reason why this is sort of a complicated map is it included other jurisdictions, and that was intentional. They were a part of that process. But if you were to take all of the yellow out of the map, then you would not have coherent corridors, either for trail development or for wildlife migration. And those were two of the primary reasons for developing these criteria. Now, you as the city council certainly have the discretion to change that view, but I would simply point out that it's a question of you balancing how important you think those ends are, coherent corridors for future trail use as well as wildlife and other natural resources purposes, and the development of land. And as I said, if you look at this map, and maybe I do it more easily, and I take all of the yellow out, you don't have any consistent corridors. You just don't.
Got it. Okay. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, how about if we exempted commercial and industrial from this ordinance altogether, but only the portion of the building and parking lot? And then have the surrounding areas would have to be somehow fall into something. Because now you can take any lot that's treed or not and plan to put something on it and say, here's the building, here's the parking lot, this is how it works. Whatever's there is exempt, but everything else on the site is not.
Which is kind of what it's doing right now.
Kind of, except.
Which is actually is what it's doing right now.
Well, except you're still.
allowing up to 60% removal of those trees.
But what if your building doesn't fit with only taking 60%?
Right.
You can't develop
Then
that
you just
lot.
have to replant trees. Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just for your consideration, as Ms. Polly pointed out, if you adopt this, and it's completely a policy decision for the council whether to do that, on a case-by-case basis, if a development comes before you and there's something unique, like the problem she mentioned with the drainage, you can change it with respect to a particular application. It's not set in stone that it's not changeable. So if something comes before you and say, this is a unique situation because of this, this, and this, therefore we're only going to require this type of tree preservation, you can do that on an exception basis as those applications come before you.
When's the last time you saw a variance out of this body?
Mayor, members of the council, you don't usually see
Yeah.
variances unless they're appealed. My experience over the years is that a large number of variances get approved by the Board of Adjustment. And one thing to keep in mind, in addition to what the city attorney said, is the approach that's proposed before you tonight is the application of the natural resources corridor criteria, which are adopted by resolution. They are not per se a part of the ordinance. And so I think that gives you even greater discretion to consider those. And so I think the city attorney is right. You have lots of discretion. I remember doing counts of the kinds of variances that have been approved. And so, for example, during a certain 4-year period of time, we had 12 requests for sign variances and 10 were granted. Are variances granted here? Yeah, they are. And the criteria are much easier to do that under than they were for a short period of time, because that was changed. So,
All right, Councilor Whiting.
Just last comment, Mr. Leake brings up a great point about the connectivity of the natural resources we have and the wildlife connections and the trails and everything. And Mr. Thompson brings up an added point that, if we do decide to make a change, we can do that. So I think trying to preserve what we have as a natural resources corridor is the ethical thing to do. And that's how I'm going to stand.
Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to say or no?
Just to the variance part, I just wanted to clarify that we've actually made it a little bit simpler, in particularly with the Dakota crossings, is that when we do our staff reviews and we put all of those review comments to the planning staff when they take it to the planning commission before it comes to city council, if we know of those issues, so in that particular case, we knew of that issue, that was actually a staff recommendation in our comments. We didn't actually have the applicant request a variance for that particular process. So we worked with that developer to say, yes, we know that this piping has to go in. This is what's being recommended by the EAC. It went forward as that recommendation to the planning commission and was approved. The actual applicant didn't have to get up and make any specific variance request for that because it was something that we were able to work with, knowing what the issues were with that development. And so we were able to put them right in their conditions of approval, just like all of our engineering requirements and everything else. So it was a much simpler process than actually the variance process.
Okay, Councilor Luce.
As regards to wildlife, I've seen ducks put a nest in a flower pot right in front of a garage that people go in and out of every day. Wildlife are gonna go where they wanna go. I've seen deer come up and eat people's flowers. Do we really want the deer walking through our yards constantly? If you do, you build out in the perimeter. If you don't, you go where there's more people and less vegetation. We've got the river as a corridor that's never going to be changed. Most of the wetlands most of these wooded lands have some wetland. They can't develop the wetland, so it's automatic there. I just can't see putting all this burden on these people.
Councilor Lehman.
I think the hypocrisy is deafening and actually sad, but I can't believe that the city is so concerned about trees but exempts itself from its own policies. It doesn't make any sense to me. If the city really was concerned about trees, they would follow their own policy, whether it's at the Quarry Lake or the boulevard trees or anything else. They don't have a problem putting this on a private property owner and his private trees. that somehow Mr. Whiting thinks they're not the community's property when they're not. But when it comes to the city's property, they exempt themselves, they can clear cut it, no repercussions whatsoever, and demand everybody else follow the rules.
What property are you talking
It's
about?
hypocrisy.
Well, you realize that we're the city, and so we can we can eliminate that before it moves forward. So what would you like to have happen?
I asked at the last meeting, and we were told that the city exempts itself because it's cost prohibitive for the city to follow this ordinance. When we take a tree down on a road project on a boulevard, are we gonna replace it with two? No. So it's cost prohibitive for us, but it's okay if it's cost prohibitive for what we're trying to do in Shakopee and bring economic development here.
So let's not exempt the city.
Yeah,
Councilor Lewis.
Going to that line, what were all the trees taken down at Quarry Park for? I mean, there's quite a few that I saw stumps. I mean,
Let's stay on topic for now.
I would like
just
to.
trying to use that as a.
Yeah, let's
reasoning.
stay. I understand what you're trying to do, and you made a very good point. But I agree with you that we should be following the ordinances that we are adopting if this were to be adopted today. So, is there any further discussion? Anyone in the audience that has more to talk about this one? Mr. Soltow?
Yeah, the history on the corridor was primarily focused around the river valley and the bluff line. And I would suggest to you that the commercial industrial, as it's guided and laid out, is primarily around highway, interchange, infrastructure, things that are not bluff line and are not corridor, are not river bottom. There are 3 parcels that apply here that are gonna get nicked by this ordinance if it continues to apply to commercial industrial, that I'm aware of anyway. 2 are ours. As a connectivity, I struggle to find that. As independent habitat, I struggle to find that. I think we're throwing a lot of emotion at an issue that comes down to a very finite application of a number of parcels, and encourage you to consider the specifics. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, my concern about that is as the city continues to grow, and you and I have had this discussion, as the city moves west and southwest, there's a significant, if you look at the map, there's a significant amount of the good, better, and best portion out there that we need to have a mechanism to handle, is my opinion.
Good,
on that.
better, and best is still a qualitative application, and this map is within your discretion to change too. And you could actually take this map, bring it up for reconsideration, consider exclusion of some of those areas that arguably should not apply, and protect the areas that you seem to want to apply. You know, this map, and Michael could maybe shed more light on it, there was a long process that evolved in sensitivity to preservation of trees and history at Dean Lake, and evolution of advisory committees, and a whole lot that went into this. And it's almost terribly confusing, frankly. We got a very long and lengthy design spec that seems to be just pulled from the shelves, if you will. Does it apply? Yeah, it applies. You're looking at plants, you're looking at trees, you're looking at soil, you're looking at conservation matters, you're looking at a lot of things. So I'm not trying to discredit the design criteria in its entirety, but what I am trying to question is how it applies to what we're trying to do here. And it's, in my opinion, and I've restated it too many times, in commercial industrial, I think you're mixing objectives. There's enough challenges in trying to develop commercial industrial property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, any further discussion?
I would just like to make one comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The city is not exempt from this ordinance. I don't know if there were certain properties that you had in mind when you were referring to that, but we would follow this ordinance as anyone else did. And another comment on the length of the design criteria. Most properties only would have to abide by certain sections, and for example, the Woodland section, which is probably the longest, is maybe 5 or 6 pages long. So the entire design criteria is roughly 70 pages, but that's made up of 10 different sections. So like I said, the majority of those properties, only a few would apply.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with Councilors Lehman and Luce in dissent. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor,
Yes, okay, maybe.
Oh,
There's a follow-up one.
I was just gonna ask if we could look into the natural resource corridor and maybe making some changes to that.
We'll talk about that with F3.
Okay.
Does that work?
That's works.
There is a,
Thompson.
there is a second motion, though, that needs to be adopted, which is to approve the official summary of the ordinance. It's item number 2 under the
Oh,
requested
thank you.
action.
So the second portion of this, Councilor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the official summary and ordinance number 883 and approve the publication of ordinance 883 by the official summary.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Second, Councilor Mokel. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with Councilors Lehman and Luce in dissent. Item 10F2, revision of City Code, Section 11.6, subdivision and landscape requirements, ordinance number 884. We've been through this one once, so I don't know if we need to have presentation. Was there any major concerns on this portion that we should discuss? Councilor Lehman.
The goals stated in here, I guess I'm trying to figure out where they came from, because increased a tree canopy in Shakopee, well, we've already done that. We've already doubled it with development. Increased the survivability of the required landscaping and parking areas. Didn't know we had a problem with the trees in landscaped areas and parking lots. Reduce the negative impacts associated with large areas of, parking lots. We require them to have a certain amount of parking spaces to the square foot of the building, so that's our requirement, and now we're saying our requirement has negative impacts. I'm not in favor of putting pedestrian walkways in the middle of parking lots. I think people are gonna walk from their car to the door, and they're not gonna go over and down a sidewalk. Might work in the southern climate, but I don't think it works very well in the northern climate when you're trying to plow. And I don't know that I'm in favor of increasing the square feet for a single tree. Maybe if you have multiple trees in a larger area with multiple trees, maybe a picnic table or something, that I could see, but having just large multiple areas for single trees, I'm not in favor of that either. You're taking away from the parking and you're making a parking lot bigger, unless we downsize our parking requirements.
Other discussion?
Mayor, if I could address one of those points.
Please do.
My experience over the course of several years in the commercial industrial setting here in Shakopee is that the amount of parking provided typically relates to what the business wants to have in place. The size of those parking lots does not generally tie directly to what our parking requirements are. And I know I've used the example in Dean Lakes, but Lowe's, for example, in a conservation open space development, that's what Dean Lakes is, came in and we suggested that they provide less parking, that parking that was required under our ordinance, and they were absolutely insistent that they provide more parking because that was their corporate philosophy. So I don't think it's fair to characterize the parking requirements that the city has as resulting in those large parking areas. In large part, that relates to a number of the businesses that we've seen.
But we do have parking requirements.
Certainly we have parking requirements, but we also net those parking requirements. So for example, if you have a building, doesn't matter whether it's your building or a 200,000 square foot office warehouse building, if you've got storage areas, if you've got restrooms, if you've got lunchrooms, we net out those areas before we calculate what the parking requirement is. So we're not calculating on the gross building area that they have to begin with.
And then last one, Mayor, is number 4. It says a tree must be placed within 50 feet of each parking stall in parking lots of 50 or more spaces. That's a lot of trees in a big parking lot to be within 50 feet of each parking stall.
Mr. Mayor, that actually doesn't increase the number of trees. It pretty much just addresses spacing. So
And I think that one was to address concern at the last time we talked about this of all the trees in one spot. Someone made the
50 feet means you're gonna have a tree every 5 parking stalls?
I actually have a image of, this would require 30 or 48 trees right here for this. This is the Kohl's parking lot. So this would require 48 trees, and the 4,000 square feet requirement actually requires, 38 trees is what this requirement would be. 40 trees would be required by the, this is, I'm saying this very confused. It does not require any more trees, this spacing, than what our requirement currently is in our current landscaping ordinance.
Meaning
It just
that
addresses
trees
spacing.
are just, they're just planting them on the ends versus planting them down the parking lot structure, is that what you're stating? Cause I see that you have 10 trees here.
Yep, and I guess I just measured how many trees could fit in there if spaced every 35 feet, which is an appropriate spacing, and then calculated how many trees you would need to meet this 55-foot requirement. And it's 55 instead of 50. That was my mistake in the memo. In the ordinance, it says 55 feet. I went between 50 and 55, and I decided to go 55.
So is that just for calculating the number that would go on the outside of the parking lot, or am I reading it to where it has to be within 55 feet of each parking stall?
So the requirement for the total number of trees required for a site has not changed since the last time it's presented. This is just addressing spacing. So there couldn't be, one large parking island right here, all the trees placed in there, and then this entire area is just left open with nothing.
There could or couldn't be.
It could not be.
Okay, so how would it have to be?
There would have to be a tree placed within 55 feet of each parking stall.
So every 4th parking stall, there'd be a tree.
So, yes.
Okay.
Or a row of trees.
Okay.
Further discussion. Councilor Luce.
I can go along with this design, but I can't go along with a tree every 5 spaces.
So 5 rows of spacing, not 1 tree per 5 parking stall. So I was thinking, here's 1 row, here's another row, here's another row, here's another row. There are trees right there and trees right there. So
Then how many is, so you're saying 10 is down each row then?
Yeah, so there could be 10 trees right here, 10 trees right here, 10 trees right here, and however many would be required here. It's a little shorter, and that would meet our requirements, which would be no more trees than are currently required. It just addresses spacing them.
Councilor Luce.
I'll go along with the number of trees that you're requiring, but where they're put, that's the developer's choice. Putting them in the middle of a parking lot is senseless. You're putting a tree in an oven. You talk about all that blacktop, and we're talking about survivability.
That's one thing that hopefully will be addressed by the increased planting volume that the trees have available to them. So we've made a few tweaks that will hopefully increase the survivability. And some of the major benefits of placing trees in parking lots are shading, reducing storm water, breaking up, the visual of a sea of asphalt.
Councilor Mokum.
Well, I just wanted to answer Councilor Lehman's, the survivability. All of the trees in the parking lot by Target fell down last year. Every one of them. And I was told that once they got to that certain height, they were gonna fall over again. And so all they did was go and replace the trees with smaller ones, so you're gonna see that with the years that go on. Is that correct? That's what they were told to us. And then I will tell you, as far as creating safe zones, that parking lot is very dangerous to walk in. Even just when I walk from my business to Office Max, I mean, you're taking your life in your own hands. There's days that I will drive because I don't want to deal with it. And that's crazy to drive across the parking lot. So those are those things that I think this addresses that aren't being addressed right now.
Other questions, discussion? Hold on a minute for me. One thing that I think, at least I would like to see happen with this, which the landscape requirements, Jacob gets the beautiful position of being tossed into bigger issues, which you're welcome for that. I think that this specifically brings up a larger issue, a more systemic issue that we need to look at as a city, with the size of the parking lot stalls. I mean, the size that we require for the parking lot per car is silly, and it's much bigger than necessary. It's fairly standard, but it's not really. It doesn't really work with the next generation of development, and a lot of our parking lot requirements, stormwater requirements, runoff, those kinds of things. I think that we need to look at that as a comprehensive system. So our parking lots and how many trees we've got in there with regard to stormwater needs and utilization of rain gardens and pedestrian walkways and those kinds of things. And this is hitting at a couple of those little issues of a bigger systemic problem, in my opinion, that we need to really address as a city for the next phase of development with where we're going and how we're doing things. So I would like to see us adopt this ordinance, and if we can kill number 4 on there, I don't have a problem with that at all, of the requirements every 50 feet, 55 feet, with that, but from there, direct staff to really look at the entire system and what changes we can and should make. I mean, if it were up to me, we would dramatically reduce the amount of impervious surfaces in the city, because we as a city need to look at our land assets that we have for the next generation and where things are going. So if we have a big parking lot like we've got this one in front of us right here, that really doesn't, that does not have any density. It doesn't bring jobs that we want to have, and we need to have more things happening per acre in the city. And I think that we should direct staff to start looking at those kinds of things and how we can more incentivize and work with developers to reduce those parking areas and reduce the stall sizes, and better handle runoff and those types of things for these developments. I don't know if anybody agrees with that or where we think we should go. Councilor Whiting?
I like where you're going with the idea, because I think the runoff and the green spaces and all of that, all of us don't drive minis, you know.
Right.
So we have to, you know, look at that realistically. So, you know, parking lot, we do have some large parking lots, and that's great, because I don't like door dings either. But I think you're right, on the right track, and we should look at this comprehensively.
Councilor Lehman?
Do we currently, and I'm sure staff does, but that they take the water runoff from these and they run it down their ditches to their channels to wherever it's going for the right reasons? So I think we're already doing that. The question is, I think you want to make sure that they're doing that so that we get the full benefit of that.
And that everything works together.
Whether all that water is, you know, going to where it needs to go, so it's recharging our water tables for the future and these types of things. And Bruce is probably a better guy to speak to that than I, but I think we're already doing that, aren't we, Bruce?
And I'm not saying we're not doing a great job with it. What I'm saying is that if we were to, the spacing of the trees in there would impact how the stormwater and the runoff goes. I mean, if we incorporated rain gardens, for example, into parking lots, and allowed for those to happen, and those would work with stormwater and runoff and the amount of trees that we're putting in there, and it all is linked and joined as a big system. And now, like, these changes that we're making are one little slice of the system with regard to the landscape requirements, and I'd be much more comfortable with it if everything worked as a package.
I would give the developer the option to put a heated parking lot in, because I'll tell you what, once you do all that, the plowing contract is gonna be very expensive. I'm not gonna plow it, you wreck a truck.
One comment on something you said, Mr. Mayor. If we would space trees throughout the parking lot instead of in one area, that would dramatically reduce the amount of stormwater that even hits the ground. I mean, there are hundreds of gallons that are intercepted by a mature tree every rainfall event. So if we're looking at reducing the amount of stormwater, that would definitely be something we could do that would have a pretty significant impact.
Councilor Whiting?
And I think you talked about the tree coffins, Ms. Mokel, smaller tree boxes, and I think we addressed that the last time we looked at this, the bigger boxes, so that the trees wouldn't die and have room to live and probably grow bigger and absorb more water.
Well, the sad part was is they weren't even dead, they just fell over.
That's what they do when in the small kind of boxes, yeah.
Mr. Soltow, I cut you off earlier.
I love your comment about wanting jobs and tax base out of every acre you have here. And you're going two directions here. These trees dispersed throughout the parking lot are inefficient. You got design issues, you've got grading issues, you got drainage issues. We have a need for infiltration basins, but we also have, we talk about the benefits of perimeter landscaping from a screening standpoint and light control and other aspects. And now you want to intersperse within the middle of the parking lot some of these trees. So you're taking away on one, putting in another. And the ultimate impact of what we're looking at with this ordinance is more land. It's going to require more land. So the objective you have of trying to find efficiencies with creating jobs and tax base, that 1 acre outlot is now going to be 1.25 acres. And it's not going to sell one more hamburger or be worth $1 more, because it's going to value off net income, and it's just going to cost more. And because it costs more, it's going to be less likely to be built. So I go back to the core. I don't recall, frankly, and I don't want to challenge this entirely, but where did this come from? What was wrong with what we have? Because we don't have trees dying at Southbridge. We don't have trees dying in Walmart's parking lot. We don't have them on the perimeter. I haven't seen one tip over, frankly. With all due respect, I'm not familiar with what's happened in Target's lot. I'm surprised if they have, and I'm sure they're willing and replace them. They'll maintain their vegetation. Most commercial places do. I don't see the problem, quite frankly. So I'm asking again, what are we trying to do? Do we want an incentive for commercial industrial development, or do we want more cost, more process, more regulation? Some point in time, somebody's gonna tell me what color these buildings gonna be, who's gonna be in them, and how many people are gonna be there, and I don't have a choice. Seems to me the market should have some choice in this matter. Thank you.
Councilor Lehman tried to make all the buildings pink and purple at one time, but
Polka dots. Thank
you.
I just have a few comments on that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
This actually, it shouldn't take up more space, considering that will still be considered green space. We still should be able to have 75 or 85%, whatever it is, impervious surface. It's pretty much just taking, if there's a big green space in the back of the building, all right, let's put some of that in the parking lot to receive some of the benefits of that. So it wouldn't be taking up a significant amount of land, and it's not requiring more trees in a parking lot than we currently require.
No, you're none in the parking lot now.
Excuse me, Counselor?
There's none in this parking lot now.
Because they're all dead, because they're all putting tree coffins.
No, they're on the ends.
Yep, they're on the ends.
Yeah, they're all right here. So I'm guessing the cost would go up quite a bit, putting in a whole bunch of small islands versus some larger islands. Especially if some of those larger islands aren't required to be curbed the entire way.
All right.
Fully curbed.
Mr. Mokel back there would like to speak.
Well, as a small business,
You got to introduce
sorry, John
yourself.
Mokel.
You got to write it down. Is it your first time?
Isn't he
It
a Jim?
But as a small business owner, I think I'm gonna kind of talk a little bit to what Steve was talking about with the more land that you require for development is going to impact small businesses coming into town. In our case, we pay 25% of our rent is in our CAM charge, which is for the vegetation, the landscaping. Now, you keep putting more and more restrictions on that. We have more land that we have to develop, or we have to put green space, is going to cost me more money. As a small business owner, the more money you charge me, or that my developer charges me for the land, is going to hurt me, which means I'm going to have to raise my prices, or I'm going to have to go out of business. And we talk about, I'm going to kind of talk maybe a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here. We were talking about parking spaces. I don't think we want to get to the point of being like in Edina where you can't park your vehicle at, Centennial Lakes? It's so tight that you can't get a vehicle in there or out. But we've got to be careful about what we're doing to the small business owner. And if we truly care about the small business owner, I think we have to look at how much landscaping criteria are we going to put on them and the developer, because they're going to charge it back to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. You're not going to take that and absorb that for yourself. You're passing it to me. So I think that's something you got to keep in mind when you're bringing these regulations and ordinances, is what it's going to do to the end user, which is me as a small business owner. That's all I have to say.
So what is your opinion of here as to what is increasing the burdens on small business owners that it is right
What I'm
now?
saying is when you place an ordinance on landscape and you're placing the trees and you're placing all of this, that's going to cost me money, because what it's going to do is the developer is going to take and say it's a 1 acre plot of land. And that 1 acre plot of land, if I'm using a quarter of that, I'm paying a quarter of the CAM charge for the trees, for the landscaping, for the mowing of the yard, for the sprinkler system to keep the grass green, whatever it is, the watering. That's all coming back to me. And so what I'm saying is when you're thinking about this, you've got to think about not only the developer and what it's doing to them, you need to think about what it's going to do to the small business owner. Not everybody is a Target. Not everybody is a Kohl's. You've got small business owners here, and you've got to think about, and I'm going to go back and look at the history of business. If you go through a recession like we started in 2008, a lot of small businesses struggled because they still have to pay the CAM no matter how many people come into our business. So I think that's what I'm trying to say is you got to think about what is the impact to the final user. Not only the impact to the environment, because I'm as big an environmentalist as there is, but I'm also thinking about what's best for the small business owner.
My issue with what you're saying there is that, so the trees that fell down, you got charged CAM for every single one of those.
Correct.
And so if we required it to be built correctly in the first place, then you wouldn't have been billed for those 10 years later.
Correct.
And they would have stayed there. And
Correct.
so it in my opinion, we just want it to be done right. I don't think we're going to have an issue getting rid of this number 4 on the spacing of 55 feet here. So I think that we'll be able to get to talk about that one some more and possibly not include that in the ordinance. But beyond that, I think that it's all positive steps to help people use more sustainable practices. And like I said, it needs to go to a more systemic discussion that I'd like to have at a workshop sometime in the near future as to how we give developers more opportunities for more sustainable development so that your CAM charges are less in the long run. Councilor Lehman.
If you put the trees on the outside of this parking lot, your CAM charges for snow removal decrease, your longevity of the trees increases, your maintenance costs decrease. You know, and I'm not an expert in that, that's more your area, but that helps you and it helps the city and the developer, because they don't have to come back and replace them when they fall down or whatever.
Councilor Luce.
And with that same idea of putting all your vegetation on the perimeter, if you crown the lot, you can automatically water your trees and your shrubbery. All the rainwater will go to the sides, any excess can be used up in the storm holding ponds.
It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, but you're talking your rainwater gardens, if you set it up properly, it'll absorb it.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about things that we should discuss into the future? Because right now that's not the way it works. Right
No,
now it
but
goes curb
if
into
they would
the.
work that into it,
Yeah.
you know, it's a good idea. That way they don't have to be, you know,
Absolutely.
I just would have that put into, you know, some kind of a benefit to the developer that he gets, you know, some incentive for doing something on that order.
All right. I think we're ready for a motion. Council Whiting.
I'll move to adopt ordinance number 884, an ordinance of the city of Shakopee amending section 11.60 subdivision 8 of the Shakopee City Code landscape requirements with the modification that doesn't require trees every 55 feet.
Item number 4.
Item number 4 on the general description is that.
Do we have a second?
Thompson.
I'll second that.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Mr. Thompson, do you have something?
Yes, I just want clarification on the motion. And J.C. might have to help me on this. So the proposed language in the statute, and the ordinance reads, parking stalls shall be located no more than 55 feet from the center of an on-site shade tree. That would be stricken. But in that same section, what is already stricken is at least one deciduous tree. Do you want that back in?
Number on that one?
Yes, so for F1, what's stricken, that's what was proposed originally, and that's what I would prefer to be in.
In other words, what was, the added language was in place of what was stricken. You're not gonna add the language, so you gotta leave in what is stricken, correct?
I will amend my motion to include the language that was stricken in F1.
Councilor Mokel, do you accept the amendment?
Trying to figure it out here.
Jacob, can you put that on the screen?
Here.
Can you put
No,
that
I'm reading it, I'm just
Okay.
deciding if that's what I want.
My,
You're not up yet, sorry. We haven't got us acceptance of the amendment.
well, it's clarification on what's being added.
Right.
Jacob's working on that right now.
Yeah, that's right here.
All right, Jacob, show us what's going on here.
So, we would remove the parking stall should be every 50 feet, and at least one deciduous shade tree should be planted within the boundaries of the parking facility for every 4,000 square feet of paved area. So that's actually what was in the ordinance.
That's correct. That was-
Previously.
That's in the, I just wanted to make it clear that
Yep.
that's gonna stay in the current ordinance, because on here it shows that it's being stricken out. That's.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that.
Councilor Whiting, so you're good with that? Councilor Mokel, you're okay with that?
I was just,
Councilor Lehman, discussion.
I was just making sure that the reference that was underlined was being removed from the paragraph that was being added back in.
It is.
Yes.
Exactly. All right, Mr. Olson, quickly, please.
Mayor, point of information. This landscape ordinance, I have two things I'd like to say. One is if we're about economic development and creating more jobs here in Shakopee, I think you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's got to be one way or the other. If a wooded parcel and the tree thing's fine, I want to focus more on the landscaping thing. If we're going to make this harder for developers, it's going to be less likely for them to develop. And if there's any kind of a economic downturn again, it's going to hurt people like the Mokels. And on the other hand, this is a landscaping ordinance. My question is for you, Mayor. Do you own a landscaping business? And if so, do you find it ethical to vote on a ordinance like this?
I do not own a landscaping business. No, I have a
Okay.
consulting company, and no, it is not a conflict of interest to vote on this in the slightest.
Okay. Was it called ethical consulting?
Yes, let's stay on topic.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate your concern.
Yeah,
for
I'm concerned because I don't want any conflict of interest in this body.
Okay, the only way that conflict of interest is defined is if I'm going to make money off of this ordinance, which I shall not.
Right. But I mean, let's say you did. Let's say it was landscaping company. Even if you're not a contract with the city, wouldn't you think that that's a little bit of a conflict of interest, sir?
No. Moving on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, is everybody clear as to what the motion is? All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with councilors Luce and Lehman in dissent. Was that correct?
Yes. Oh, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to also make a motion to approve the official summary of ordinance 884 and approve the publication of ordinance number 884 by the official summary.
Do we have a second?
Do we need to amend that as well?
Mr. Mayor, you won't need to amend it, because it's just, 1 second.
It does have item number 6 in there.
Then we'll have to take it out. If the summary includes the 50 feet, we'll take that out of the summary.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll add that to my motion.
So the motion is 884 with the removal of item number 6 in there, correct?
That's correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with councilors Luce and Lehman in dissent. So can I ask, why did you guys vote against that? Why, this is the current landscaping standards that we've been on that,
Sidewalks don't belong in a parking
Yeah,
lot.
sidewalks down the middle lane.
oh, that's the issue?
That's one of the issues for me.
Okay. All right.
Now, and I think we're
You know,
gonna.
as per Kathy's problem with walking across the parking lot, you know, I understand that. Speed bumps, put a couple in, they slow down.
But it's not, the speed bumps wouldn't work in where the speeding goes. I mean, you're talking, the speeding is, so, you know where Zupas is and it's pulled and you've got the cars there. The speeding goes across there. There's no
You
place
can't-
for speed bumps.
You can't legislate stupidity. You just can't do it.
Or you
There's-
give people who want to walk a protected place to
there's
walk.
People that drive right through stop signs all over town.
All right, item 10F3, Natural Resources Corridor Design Criteria Amendment. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, this is just pretty much an update of the design criteria to align with the proposed tree preservation regulations. The definitions and tree preservation plans were updated. The only change that's really being made that is notable is currently no more than 50% of the significant trees are allowed to be removed, and that's for all the natural resources corridors. And there's no heritage trees that are supposed to be removed. What's proposed is the tree removal standards are consistent with the proposed ordinance, with the exception that over 50% of the high priority trees, or if there are over 50% of the high priority trees removed, then they'll have to have a replacement of 1 to 1.5. So it's pretty much taking out the 50% significant tree removal, and our current proposed ordinance, which was just adopted, addresses that, because that has allowable removal percentages. And instead of not allowing any heritage trees to be removed, 50% of high priority trees are allowed to be removed, and then after that, they have to be replaced. Does that make some sense?
Questions? Councilor Lehman.
Were we gonna ask him to go back and update this? Is that what we were gonna do?
I was going to let Councilor Mokel ask that, yeah.
Yes, I was wondering if we could update some of this with the non-natural wetlands. Because when you're doing the ponds, I don't think that those should be really considered a natural resource. Because those are things that you implement when you do development. They're not necessarily part of that corridor.
To address that, I don't believe there are any detention ponds that are considered a natural resources corridor. Maybe they have what's considered a buffer around them, which don't really have any requirements behind them. It's just kind of a way to say that there's for a buffer.
There are retention ponds that are in the good category. Quite a few.
That's
of them,
why we
actually.
were talking about the
And then
yellow.
there's
Well,
lots.
that's something that we can definitely
Yeah.
review. and
Mayor, and there's lots that have no trees on them that are showing that they have various levels of trees on them.
Right, that have changed since 2005.
Right.
Councilor Whiting?
Any idea what kind of cost it would be to update this plan or this map?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, let me just address one thing really briefly, is that what's in front of you tonight is just the woodland section and the definition section to get it in line with the adopted tree ordinance that you adopted previously tonight. If you want the EAC and staff to go back and look at the natural resource design criteria and the corridor map, you can do that. However, tonight, it's not looking at the entire criteria, and that's not what we're here to look at. We're here just to look at trying to make the woodland section consistent with our current ordinance that you've now passed. Because the current section now goes along with the past ordinance that has that we can't remove any heritage trees and only 50% of trees on that site to be removed. So we want to update this section. You can direct us to go forward. I will tell you, to answer your question, Councilor Whiting, is that we do not currently have an active EAC. We have 3 members on an EAC. We have had yet this year to be able to get all 3 members to have a quorum at a meeting. So it's going to be something that will be done over time as we build up that EAC, or if we look at a different avenue of trying to get those updated, and whether or not we want to rehire a consultant to help us do that like we did in 2005 when this was done. But by all means, we can put it on our work schedule to do and to come back with some updates as we have those resources to do so. All we're asking for you tonight is, though, to look at this particular section.
Right. Thank you. So we've got two issues, basically, that we would like to address is what we'd like to do with that natural resource corridor into the future and give direction on that. And then second one is to adopt the amendments to make this resolution work with the one that we previously passed. Councilor Lehman.
The third, I think what I was asking is, can we take just the existing map that you showed us tonight and get that map updated?
That we can work on as staff, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Not
what
all
I'm
the-
thinking too.
Oh, that's what I meant when I said the first one.
Okay.
The mapping,
Sorry.
correct. I
Yeah.
think that's something we could probably work with our GIS technician on and figure that out. But.
Okay. Councilor Whiting.
In order to align these ordinances, I'll offer Resolution 7442, a resolution of the City of Shakopee, Minnesota, amending Section 1 and 4 of the Natural Resources Corridor Design Criteria and move its adoption.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with Councilor Luce and Lehman in dissent, because you guys don't want our ordinances to match, or what? You just want them to be 2 different ordinances?
Don't like
Is that
the
where you're trying to go?
ordinance, Don't agree with the ordinance.
Well, that's fine, but you just voted for the ordinances not to match, which doesn't really work out very well.
Don't agree with finding somebody $500 for taking down one of their personal trees.
All right. Thank you very much. We're through that one. Item number 11, council member reports. We'll start on that side. Councilor Whiting.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thursday, April 24th, the Shakopee Diversity Alliance held their quarterly membership meeting with a presentation by Mohammed Dual, a Somali cultural liaison for the city of Eden Prairie. His presentation gave great insight into Somali culture. Thursday, May 1st, 2014, the Shakopee Downtown Flower Basket fundraiser. I think we can call it the social event of the season. The mayor spoke along with Laura Pico, our new Main Street program coordinator.
Correction.
Yeah.
It's not ours.
Well,
It's a
our
chamber's.
city's new, you're right, Main Street program coordinator, yep. May 2nd and Friday, May 9th, Scale met. The membership meeting had a presentation by Tom Pelozny, GM of Mystic Lake Casino and Hotel, regarding the Southwest Metro Joint Marketing Effort. Also, there was an interesting presentation regarding the Dan Patch Line by John Deers, the history of its potential future. Gary Shelton presented a strategic planning update, and Claire Roebling gave a preview of next month's legislative update. Monday, April 24th, SPUC met. Electrical service interruptions included one in the Howard edition, which lasted a couple of hours to complete the maintenance on that. The Tom Bovitz Scholarship Award was awarded to Shevpov Penn for first place and Luke Brecky for second place. The water storage tank number 7 construction bid was awarded to the low bidder, DN Tanks, for the cost of $2,739,676. Joe Hellkamp was elected president to the commission this year, Terry Yost, vice president, and John Crook, secretary. May 19th, the Public Utilities met and scrutinized details of their water policy manual. SPUC was taking a very serious look at all customer-friendly options. The annual outage reliability report was given and showed Shakopee's electrical grid was 99.994% efficient and operational. In the last 20 years of collecting data, last year was the lowest occurrences of outages at 66 incidents, and a record low 27% outages were caused by animals, 9% were trees, and lightning caused the longest time loss of all outages. This last month's outages were caused by lightning, 2 occurrences, one at 90 minutes long and another at 45 minutes long. Last month, Spuck promoted a LED light bulb offer, which was administered through the local hardware store. The promotion was hindered by delays in receiving the merchandise, and then an extreme rush on the entire quantity was sold out within 2 hours of its when it began. Spuck sincerely apologized for any inconvenience that it may have caused, and will be looking at better ways at administering such promotions in the
What
future.
was the quantity, do you know?
No, I was going to ask Jordan that. I think it was
1,200.
1,200?
That's it?
LED bulbs. Spuck has reviewed our joint discussion held with the City Council last month, and they are looking into electrical outage notification opportunities on their own website and potential of various social media sites notices. Any further development of changes to policy that was discussed will need to be coordinated through joint changes in review in policy and ownership of assets.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Luce?
Went to a couple school board meetings, nothing really fantastic jumped out. They are doing a good job. They're working forward on all the projects they got going. Had a very good meeting with the Union Pacific representative a week ago with Mr. Loney and Mr. McNeil present and their representative. We moved things forward. I think we're on the right track. I think it's positive at this point, and we'll wait and see what they come back with.
Very good. Councilor Mokel?
On April 24th, I went to the Metro City's annual meeting with Councilor Luce, and there was a presentation about how weather can change the trajectory of a city. There was an example of a sawmill in southeast Minnesota, and they were hit by a tornado and went from a booming mill town to choosing not to rebuild. The flooding in East Grand Forks that led to condemning whole neighborhoods. And then the most recent event was in Duluth. On April 30th, I was the guest of Representative Mike Beard at the State of the State. It was a great evening for business owners to talk about how this year's legislation will affect their businesses. On May 1st, we had the Chamber Women's event, and then also the Flower Basket fundraiser that evening. And on May 2nd, Saks had their annual gala raising money for tuition assistance programs. On May 13th, I was honored to be the guest of former Congressman Mark Kennedy at the annual meeting for the Center of the American Experiment with Speaker George Will. It was a fun evening and very informative. And on May 14th, we had our chamber luncheon with an update from Representative John Klein. And then May 15th was the 31st annual Scott County Law Enforcement Memorial Scholarship Dinner at the Shakopee Legion. And I would like to thank our officers for their dedication to serve with us every day and congratulate the scholarship recipients.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Lehman?
Mine's going to take about 2 hours, so we might want to take a couple-minute recess here first. Shakopee Derby Days, attended that meeting, and I'm going to be very short because everybody else is so long. They are looking for donations, sponsors, chair people, and volunteers. It's ShakopeeDerbyDays.org, or is it .com? I think it's organization.
Just search for Shakopee
Yep.
Derby Days. It'll be
Derby
fine.
Days. They're in the planning
right up.
process. I got some new stuff this year, which is going to be kind of interesting to see. Strongman competition, maybe.
Oh, that's
Maybe.
cool.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm
You
going to
gonna
take
do it?
first. So we'll see how that goes.
All right, very nice. I back on the 9th of May, San DiMaggio and I attended a Hamlin Symposium on economic development, and so that was a good day about social impact and how we can work to make economic development work better in the community. On the 12th, attended Regional Council of Mayors, and there was a presentation from Red Cross about readiness, which was really good, and I've got information to put in the activity packet for that, as well as Mark Ritchie presented on the World's Fair, which we have a bid for 2023 for the World's Fair coming to Minnesota, and so they're looking for communities' help and different things like that. So it was a very interesting discussion that we'll talk about more. then that's all I've got. Item number 12, other business. I've got one thing for other business with regard to council member reports. Do we want to continue having those here at the meeting, or should we just put them in the activity report? I would rather just put them in the activity report.
I don't care one way or the other.
And if there's anything major people want to discuss, we can talk about it in other business. Everybody good with that? All right. Any other business? We got multiple head nods for that last one, just so you know.
Taking notes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Get those to us by
Councilor Lehman.
Friday
Motion to
morning.
adjourn to
Friday
May
before council.
27th, 7 PM.
Every Friday morning.
Every
We'll,
Friday
we'll
morning.
send it out. We'll be good.
Sorry.
So we have a motion, and we have a second. Second by Councilor Luce to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are adjourned.